So we have some updates on the dispatch censorship story. I apologize for this because this is one of those situations where like I don't know anything about the game. I don't know anything about the developer. Like this is like some flavor of the month adventure game that nobody really plays or talks about. And this is just some example, right, of just how this giant nothing burger has been blown up to this insane conspiracy. And I did believe people that really nobody should listen to, because I assumed it was true, because everyone like was very very upfront about this, like, oh yeah, the Switch version is censored. Oh, so like everyone, like, including myself, made the logical leap to assume that Nintendo was responsible for it, right? It seemed perfectly reasonable to me. It was something that I supported. It was something that I do believe like does need to happen. That we do need to have more regulation over sexual content in video games. Like I was very supportive of Nintendo for this decision. However, as it turns out, this was not the case. Like the reason that Dispatch was censored on Nintendo Switch had nothing to do with Nintendo themselves, but had more to do with the Japanese rating board and how they are like cracking down more on like sexually explicit content in games. So Nintendo doesn't censor things. The Japanese rating board Zero does. Essentially, they came out and they said that like Dispatch needs to make changes. This isn't acceptable. Yada yada yada. So Adhoc, the company, decided to blame Nintendo for the censorship and for being a Japanese company, and like did these really weird censorship decisions, right? And because like they had to like retool the game for Switch or whatever, they weren't willing to like remove the censorship for other versions of the game. It's kind of a convoluted like scenario, and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Like it's way too autistic to understand, and I don't blame anybody at all for like blaming Nintendo for this, but like it has become apparent over the past couple of days that Nintendo is not responsible for this, that Dispatch was lying, that the developers were like straight up making this up and trying to blame Nintendo for attention. And it was very, very embarrassing, and that I fell for this. This is like the biggest Harmon Smith L of the year. This is something that I like desperately like. I've seen situations like this happen before, right? But again, this is what usually happens is that it's some like small Japanese company like Compile Heart or like Idea Factory or whatever. They come out and they do this thing where they're just like, we have this planned release for Nintendo Switch, but oops, Nintendo banned our game. Please support us on PC instead. And it's like it's just like a self-promotional tactic. Like, as far as I'm aware, this exact situation hasn't exactly played out before. And I believe the reason it became such an issue was because this was a Western developer. Because usually when it's a Japanese dev getting censored, nobody really cares that much, okay? Like, Game Journo's brushing under the rug, and you have, like, the Spurgs, like, salivating over, like, generic underage, like, anime girls, like, being forced into, like, less revealing outfits. Like, you see people like freak out over stuff like that, right? But like, it never really hits the mainstream. Like the thing that made Dispatch different is that it did hit the mainstream. Like, this is a game that nobody cared about, that nobody remembers, that nobody plays. And for some reason, this thing became mainstream. Like, people like really wanted to push this idea that Nintendo was actively like censoring this game, and this has been a myth since like the 90s, because Nintendo hasn't really tried to block third-party games since like Mortal Kombat 1 on the Super Nintendo, right? This is like a 30-year-old meme at this point, and over 30 years old actually, and people are like still sitting there like trying to like create this fabrication that Nintendo wants to censor everything, that they only make games for children, that they hate third parties, they hate this kind of thing. And like, there doesn't seem to be any real indication that it is true. Like, this does seem to be a Japanese rating board issue. This does seem to be like an issue with Adhoc. It does seem to be like a situation that has nothing to do with Nintendo themselves. So this really begs the question, and something that we really do need to talk about is like, we now have like more clarification on like how these kind of changes are made. You know, like, you never once hear people address the Japanese rating board for these kind of changes. Like, in actuality, you know, all the changes that you see getting, Nintendo getting blamed for are probably a result of the Japanese rating board, of Zero, you know. Like, a lot of these changes are probably demanded for by them. And the reason you're seeing all of this is because of that specifically. You know, it has nothing to do with Nintendo, and what we've been seeing over the past couple of years of people like, you know, complaining about random line changes or like costume changes overseas, like, it very well may be because of what they've been doing over there. And the meme right now is that, like, well, the Zero has been compromised and they're forcing woke shit onto the Japanese developers. Like, the creators themselves are like making a lot of decisions at this point. Like, this whole idea of like this external force like forcing developers to like do certain things is and always has been a meme. You know, like, we're seeing this now with Tomodachi Life, where people are like trying to say that like Devin Pitchford is behind like Tomodachi Life being woke, when like the Nintendo themselves were very clear that they wanted this going forward, right? I don't agree with it, I don't like it, but like the idea that like Devin Pritchford is behind this is just laughably stupid, right? Like, again, this is what the market wants. Like, that's the problem that we're seeing with like these kind of things, is that like it brings in way more people than it puts off at this stage, right? I am very, very interested in seeing like at what point this kind of thing becomes more widely known, because I feel like the instant that the general public like realizes that the narrative that Nintendo censors games is completely wrong, like, that's going to be one of the like the downfall of one of the biggest hopes in gaming industry history, you know, because this was the defining thing that kind of like made PlayStation relevant, was this idea that it was like more adult and mature than what Nintendo did, where it was more sexually charged and they were able to do more things. This was cringy. This was embarrassing, you know, like, this narrative has never really been true, but this is the angle that the third parties took in trying to promote their brands on PlayStation hardware. And now we're kind of at the point where, like, it's all starting to fall apart. Like, Dispatch desperately tried leaning into that meme to try and blame Nintendo for the situation. And now that they've been exposed, like, their entire lie crumbled. And now we're kind of in this position where, like, this entire controversy was a giant nothing burger. You know, now that we know that like Adhoc made these decisions themselves based on like the demands of the Japanese ratings board, like, you know, Nintendo is not at fault, and the story has no relevancy. You know, no one wants to hear about censorship unless Nintendo is actively enforcing it. Like, that's just the reality. Like, nobody cares about censorship unless they can blame Nintendo for it. And that's just the reality of this industry that I've noticed over the past several years. You know, you see people spurging out about, like, Night Trap or Mortal Kombat, like, over 30 years later. But for cases of censorship on other platforms, like, you never even really hear about it when it happens. And this is, especially if it's on PC, you know, this is the kind of thing that's, like, incredibly embarrassing. And it is something that we do have to address, that these people, the censorshitters, are completely delusional and need to be called out on their nonsense.